Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The fluorescent lights above the Walmart parking lot hissed and flickered like dying fireflies, casting uneven shadows across the rain-slick asphalt. It was after midnight. The store was still open, humming like it always did. Soulless, sterile, indifferent. Jacob didn't remember driving here. One moment he was standing in his kitchen, staring blankly into the refrigerator, wondering why he felt like crying. The next, he was parked in front of the same Walmart where she vanished 10 years ago, almost to the hour, gone, no struggle, no witnesses, no trace. Emma Langston, his fiancée, had walked in to buy fabric softener and hadn't walked out. Jacob's fingers trembled on the steering wheel. His eyes were locked on the glass entrance doors, even though he wasn't sure what he was expecting to see. Maybe a memory, maybe just some forgotten reflex pulling him here again, like trauma baked into muscle memory. And then he saw her, aisle 9. Through the glass, past the flickering lights and late-night shoppers, she stood there, motionless, alone. In front of the cleaning products, Jacob's heart stopped. She turned, her face. It was Emma. Older? No, just wrong. Her skin was pale, not like someone who hadn't seen sun, but like she wasn't meant to be here. Her blue sundress was damp, frayed at the hem, and stained with something dark. Mud, oil, no, blood. Her hair hung in clumps around her shoulders, tangled and dripping. Her eyes, Jesus, her eyes, were wide and glassy, like she was looking straight through him, and then she smiled, just slightly. Jacob didn't think. He shoved the door open and stumbled inside. "Emma!" he choked out, loud enough that the woman near the self-checkout glanced at him. A chill hit him the moment he crossed the threshold. It wasn't just cold, it was dead. Like walking into a freezer that held more than just meat. Emma didn't move. She just kept staring. He walked forward slowly, like if he stepped too hard she might vanish again. His sneakers squeaked on the tile. The store's overhead music, some forgotten 2000s pop song, was playing low and distorted, like a warped cassette. The employees didn't seem to notice him, or her. Nobody looked. He made it halfway to aisle 9 before the lights flickered violently, a strobing seizure of brightness and dark. Then, total blackness. "Emma," he whispered into the void. The store fell silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that presses on your eardrums, like something was holding its breath, and then, from the darkness, came the sound of bare feet slapping on tile, wet, fast, coming toward him. Jacob froze. Breath, hot and sweet rotten, brushed his ear, then a whisper, "You didn't look for me." The lights snapped back on. Emma was gone. A cart rolled lazily past the end of the aisle. A toddler wailed in the distance. Life had returned, but nothing felt right. "Sir?" Jacob turned, heart jackhammering in his chest. A security guard stood behind him. Young, too young to remember the case. Maybe early 20s, with pale skin and a blank expression that didn't match the situation. His name tag said Brian. "You can't be in this part of the store," he said. His tone was flat, like he was repeating lines from a play. She was... Jacob swallowed. "There was a woman, right here. Emma Langston. She disappeared from this aisle 10 years ago, and I know who she is," the guard said too quickly. Jacob blinked. Brian's eyes twitched. Just a flicker, but it was there. Fear, and something else. Recognition. "You saw her?" Jacob pressed. "You saw her just now." Brian looked past Jacob's shoulder into the dark stretch of aisle 9. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, he shook his head. "I didn't see anything," he said. "And neither did you." Jacob stepped forward, desperate. "I need to check. The footage, the cameras. I'll pay. I'm not crazy." "I didn't say you were," Brian said softly, "but you need to leave." "Brian, she doesn't like when people remember." The words came out like a mistake, like they slipped from his mouth before he could stop them, and the moment he said them, his face changed. Panic, regret, guilt. "What did you say?" Jacob asked. But Brian was already backing away. "Stores. Closing early. Just go." He turned and walked off, faster than necessary. Jacob stood alone in the aisle, heart pounding, throat dry, mind racing. It felt like something had shifted, like reality had warped slightly around the edges, and then something slapped the glass entrance. Hard, once, twice, 3 times. Heads turned. A few customers mumbled. Someone laughed nervously. The slapping stopped. Jacob slowly walked toward the front of the store. His shoes felt heavier. The lights above buzzed louder. His reflection in the freezer glass seemed delayed, like it moved a second too late. He reached the doors. Emma was there. Right. On the other side, her hands were pressed to the glass. Blood matted her hair. One eye was swollen shut. The smile had widened. Unnatural now, grotesque, stretching too far across her face. She looked like she had crawled out of somewhere awful. Jacob stared, frozen. She raised one hand, slowly. Her finger traced 3 words on the fogged glass. "You left me." Tears welled in Jacob's eyes. "I didn't," he whispered. "Emma, I didn't know," but she wasn't listening. She leaned forward until her cracked lips were nearly touching the glass. Then she mouthed something. "Follow me." The doors didn't open. She turned, stiff, twitching like a broken marionette, and walked back inside. Only she didn't walk into the store. She walked into the wall of darkness just beyond the customer service desk and vanished. The lights above him went out again. Total blackout. The store was silent, and then the sound of footsteps, wet, soft. Behind him, Jacob turned, but there was no one there. Cliffhanger Jacob, still grieving, sees Emma in the exact aisle where she vanished 10 years ago. She appears older, bloodied, but undeniably real. The store goes dark. She mouths a haunting message and disappears into a wall of shadow. A young guard seems to know something, but refuses to speak. Jacob is left alone, but not really alone, as footsteps approach in the dark. The blood never dried on aisle. 9 Jacob barely remembered getting home. His boots were soaked, mud up to his calves. He didn't remember walking through mud, didn't remember driving. But there he was, back in the tiny house on Maple Street, the one he hadn't been able to sell since Emma vanished. The keys were still in the front door. He hadn't lived here in years, couldn't bear to. But tonight, he didn't go back to his apartment. His body brought him here like it was wired to return to pain. The house smelled the same, faint vanilla from the candles Emma used to love. But now, underneath it, something else. Something metallic, damp. Jacob stood in the kitchen and stared at the counter. A half-finished shopping list sat there, still taped to the fridge. Bleach, dish soap, fabric softener. It was the same list she'd taken with her that night. He never took it down. 10 years, and the ink hadn't faded. Like it was written yesterday. He picked it up. The paper was damp, but not from humidity. A smudge of brown streaked across the middle. He touched it, still wet. Blood. Jacob dropped it. Something creaked upstairs. He didn't move. Didn't even breathe. Then came a whisper. She begged you not to let her go alone. Jacob spun around, eyes wild. No one was there, but the hallway lights were on now. They hadn't worked in years. One by one, the bulbs lit up, guiding him toward the stairs, like something wanted him to follow. He stepped forward. The floorboards groaned under his weight, like they were remembering something. Regret, buried history, every photograph on the wall was crooked, all except one, Emma's graduation picture. She was smiling, holding a cheap bouquet from the gas station. Jacob had taken that photo. Her eyes had been full of life, mischief, hope. Now, something was wrong. With them, he stepped closer. Her pupils were gone, just white, like they'd been scraped clean. He backed away, and the hallway lights flickered and died. Darkness again, only this time a voice followed. Soft, familiar, broken. "You said you'd meet me by the checkout." Jacob ran up the stairs. The second floor was cold, colder than outside, the kind of cold that lives in bones, in guilt, in things left unsaid. The bedroom door was ajar. Something was moving inside. He pushed the door open slowly. His hands shook. The air smelled like rain and wilted flowers, and something else. Fabric softener, Emma's favorite kind. Lavender and vanilla. The room was empty, except for the closet. The door was open, just a crack. He stepped forward. Then a sound, click, click, click from the closet, like fingernails on wood. "Emma?" he whispered. The door opened wider. He reached out and something grabbed his wrist. Cold, wet, stronger than it should have been. Jacob screamed and yanked back. The hand pulled with unnatural force, but then let go, just as suddenly. He stumbled back and fell, hitting his head against the nightstand. The closet door creaked open fully, empty. Only a Walmart vest lay crumpled at the bottom, Emma's. Her name tag still attached, rusted at the edges. He crawled forward, heart pounding, and picked it up. It was soaked and still warm. The next morning, Jacob went back to the Walmart. The outside world looked the same. Nothing burned, nothing cursed. Shoppers came and went, blind to the history buried in tile and drywall. He walked in through the automatic doors, hands clammy in his coat pockets. The overhead lights buzzed like a swarm of bees. The store was alive, but not in a good way. He scanned for the security guard. Brian found him standing near the electronics aisle, arms crossed, fake smile plastered on like a sticker. "Hey," Jacob said, stepping in front of him. Brian flinched like he'd been slapped. "Sir, I told you." "No," Jacob snapped. "You didn't tell me anything, but last night you saw her. I know you did." Brian's eyes darted around, making sure no one was listening. "Lower your voice." "Where is she?" Jacob whispered. "What is this place?" Brian leaned in, voice trembling. "I shouldn't be saying this. I need this job. But," he swallowed, "you're not crazy. You saw her because she wanted you to. People see things in this store sometimes. Not just her. Others." "What? Others?" Brian looked around again. "They say this Walmart was built over an old hospital, one that had a basement, underground rooms, experiments. Kids went missing. One night, the place just caught fire and burned down, but no record survived. No one talks about it." Jacob stared at him, ice crawling down his spine. Brian continued. "After Emma disappeared, a few of us, employees, tried to dig. We found footage, brief, one frame. She never left the store." "What do you mean?" "I mean she walked toward aisle 9, Brian's voice cracked, "and just disappeared, like the feed skipped. One frame she's there, next frame, gone." "You still have the footage?" Brian shook his head. "Corporate took it, erased it, told us if we said anything we'd be fired, or worse." Jacob leaned closer. "Why worse?" Brian didn't answer. His face went pale. Then he said something Jacob would never forget. "She's not dead. Not exactly." "What?" Brian whispered. "She's stuck, and she's not alone down there." Jacob's stomach turned. Down where? Brian's eyes drifted toward the back of the store. The stockroom door. Beyond that, the employee only. "The corridor. Beyond that, there's a freight elevator," Brian said. "No one uses it, not anymore. It goes down, to a floor that doesn't show up on the blueprints." Jacob's heartbeat doubled. "You've been there?" Brian looked haunted. "Once. Just the edge. There are voices and smells, and things move down there. I didn't go far." "Take me," Jacob said. "Tonight." Brian hesitated. "If I do, I might not come back." Neither did she. Later that night, when the store was nearly empty, Brian met Jacob by the loading dock. His hands shook as he unlocked the metal security gate and slipped inside. The back of the Walmart was colder, darker. The lights flickered like they were nervous. They passed rows of boxes, shrink-wrapped pallets, rusting handcarts. Then, at the very end, a metal door with peeling paint, no signage, no handle. Brian pulled out a key he wasn't supposed to have and turned it. The door opened with a groan. Inside, a freight elevator, old and massive. Buttons covered in grime. Only 2 floors listed, G and B. Basement, Jacob whispered. Brian nodded once. We don't talk about it, but it's there. They stepped in. The doors closed behind them like a tomb. Brian pressed B. Nothing happened. Then, the light above the button flickered red. A loud clunk. Then the feeling of sinking. As the elevator descended, the air grew colder, the lights dimmed, and then, just as the doors started to open, a whisper slid in between them like a blade. Jacob. Cliffhanger. Jacob is haunted by Emma's reappearance, triggering supernatural events at their old home. He confronts the Walmart security guard, Brian, who admits to seeing Emma and reveals that the store may be built over a dark past, one that connects to a sealed, hidden basement. Together, they descend into an area no one is supposed to enter. The elevator sinks, and a voice calls Jacob's name. Below aisle 9, the walls breathe. The elevator stopped. A hollow, metallic groan echoed through the shaft, followed by silence. So dense it throbbed in Jacob's ears. The lights in the elevator flickered out. Then the doors shuddered open. Darkness greeted them, thick, moist, and wrong. It wasn't just absence of light. It felt occupied. Jacob raised the flashlight he'd brought. The beam cut through the dark in shaky slices. The hallway ahead looked like no part of any Walmart. The walls were unfinished concrete, cracked and stained. Pipes snaked along the ceiling like veins. Water dripped steadily from somewhere, too rhythmic to be accidental. Brian stood frozen next to him, whispering a prayer. "This isn't part of the store," Jacob said quietly. "No," Brian whispered. "This is older." The flashlight, and caught a rusted sign half buried in cobwebs. Ward B, sub-level. Jacob's heart nearly stopped. "A hospital," he muttered. "It's true." They stepped into the corridor. The air smelled of mold, rot, and something sweet, like decaying flowers. The scent curled in Jacob's nose, stirring a memory of funeral homes. He tried to ignore the voices, not full sentences, just fragments, laughter, screaming, breathing, whispers that stopped the moment you tried to focus. Brian led the way, turning. Left at a fork, his face had gone pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. Jacob's flashlight beam landed on a door labeled Records. A heavy lock sealed it shut. "Let me try," Jacob said. He pulled out the key Brian had used earlier. But it didn't fit. Instead, the lock clicked on its own. The door creaked open. Inside was a narrow room lined with metal filing cabinets. Dust blanketed everything. Jacob opened the nearest drawer. Empty. Another. Empty. He pulled open a third and froze. Inside were dozens of patient files, each one yellowed with age, the names scribbled in shaky handwriting. Some had photos attached. Black and white mugshots. Children.1 folder was marked. Emma Lyons, admit date 2013. Jacob's blood turned cold. He opened it. No medical notes. No discharge. Just a single line, handwritten in red ink. Subject DUS-143. Contains residual charge. Retains shape. Responds to former emotional anchors. Relocation terminated. "What the hell is this?" Jacob whispered. Brian looked over his shoulder and recoiled. A second photo was tucked into the file. Emma in her Walmart uniform. Her face pale, eyes hollow, but behind her, shadows shaped like hands, reaching, gripping her shoulders. Then a clang echoed through the corridor. They both turned toward the noise. Another clang, louder, closer. "Run!" Brian hissed. Jacob didn't ask questions. They bolted back down the corridor, turning right this time, not toward the elevator, but deeper in. Doors slammed behind them. The pipes above burst, spraying icy water. They reached a metal stairwell and ducked through it. The steps descended. "Father!" Brian grabbed Jacob's arm. "That's enough. We have to go back." "No," Jacob snapped. "She's here. I feel her." "She's not the same," Brian warned. "You saw the file?" But Jacob yanked away, heart hammering with rage and guilt. At the bottom of the stairs was a door. It opened before he touched it. Inside, a massive underground room, like a forgotten operating theater. Rows of metal gurneys lined the space. Some held mannequins, others held bodies, or what used to be. Jacob stepped forward, breathing through his mouth. Then he saw her, at the far end of the room, hair matted, eyes black and sunken, clothes tattered Walmart blue. Emma. She turned, her mouth opened, and a sound came out like a child screaming inside a broken music box. Brian fell to his knees. Jacob stepped forward. "Emma." She tilted her head like she was trying to remember. "Jacob," she whispered. His heart cracked open. I thought you were dead." "I was," she said softly. "Then I wasn't." Her voice echoed strangely, like someone else was speaking with her, through her. Jacob stepped closer. Brian pulled him back. "Don't. That's not just her anymore." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "They wouldn't let me leave. I screamed. For you, I screamed and screamed." Jacob swallowed hard. "I'm here now." "I waited," she said. "But down here, time is wrong. Sometimes I'm a girl, sometimes I'm just air." Behind her, the shadows moved, twisting, wriggling, like they were part of her now. "I can feel them," she whispered. "The others. They're inside me." "Let me get you out," Jacob said. She looked down, then back at him. "I can't leave this place, Jacob. Not like I am. You can. We'll fix it. We'll—" She stepped forward, and the gurneys shook violently. Lights burst above. Sparks rained down. Brian shouted, "It's waking the others!" Emma screamed, not from fear, from pain. "Make it stop," she sobbed, clutching her chest. "It hurts to remember." Jacob ran to her and grabbed her hand. It was ice, and something moved beneath her skin, like wires. "Emma!" Her eyes widened. "You shouldn't have come here." Then she shoved him backward. Jacob flew across the room, slamming into a cabinet. Emma shrieked, not at him, but at something behind him. Brian pointed. "Jacob, the wall—" A fissure was opening. Cracks spidered across the concrete. A black shape poured out, dripping like tar, crawling on the ceiling. A shape made of whispers and screams. Emma turned to face it. "You said if I waited, he'd forget. You said you took the memory." The shadow hissed. "He remembered. That breaks the bargain." Jacob screamed, "Get away from her!" The shadow lunged. Emma raised her arms and screamed, and the gurneys exploded into fire. The room collapsed into chaos. Jacob crawled to Emma, smoke choking him. "Come with me," he begged. Emma looked at him, a flicker of her old self there, just for a second. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I have to hold it here." "What?" "If I leave, it follows." The shadow closed in. Jacob's vision blurred. The floor cracked open beneath them. Emma pushed him toward the door. "You have to go, Jacob. I'm not leaving you again. You already did." And then she smiled, not with joy, with peace. The floor split. The shadow lunged for her. "Emma, let it take her." Jacob screamed as Brian dragged him out the door, just as the room collapsed behind them. Everything went black. They awoke outside, back in the parking lot. It was dawn. The Walmart stood behind them, intact, open, shining like nothing had happened. Jacob sat up, blood in his mouth. His knuckles scraped raw. Brian coughed. "How?" Jacob looked at the building, his voice cracked. She saved us. He looked down and saw something in his hand, Emma's name tag, still warm, still stained with her blood. Cliffhanger Jacob. And Brian descend into the hidden sublevel beneath Walmart, finding remnants of an old hospital. Jacob discovers a file on Emma, proof she was experimented on and altered. They find her, still alive but changed, possessed or fused with something supernatural. Emma sacrifices herself to hold back the darkness that has taken root there, pushing Jacob to safety just as the room collapses and the shadow claims her again. The cameras never show what I saw. Jacob hadn't spoken in 48 hours. Not a word since he and Brian crawled out of the parking lot, bleeding and shaking just as the sun began to rise behind the Walmart sign like it was any normal morning, as if the earth below hadn't opened, as if Emma hadn't burned and screamed and whispered his name with her final breath, as if the dark thing under aisle 9 hadn't followed him out. He sat now in a hospital room. White walls, beeping machines. A nurse had offered him tea. He didn't. Remember if he said yes. He kept his hand clenched tight around something, Emma's name tag, still smeared with that dark, dried blood. Still warm, though no one believed him when he said that. Brian sat in the chair across from him, one eye bandaged, lips stitched from where glass had cut him. He kept mumbling the same thing over and over. We weren't supposed to see. It was never meant to be seen. Jacob finally broke the silence. They called it a hospital, he whispered, but it was never about healing. Brian looked up, haunted. It was a feeder. They brought them in and kept them broken. That shadow feeds on pain, grief, trauma, memories. Emma was just one of many. Jacob rubbed his temples. She told me it follows anchors, emotional ones. That's why she pushed you out, Brian said. To cut the tie. She thought it would stop following you. Jacob went quiet. Then, I think she was wrong. 2 days later, Jacob stood in the Walmart parking lot again, alone this time. The store looked the same, bright, normal, almost cheerful. He stepped inside. No one screamed. No alarms blared. No managers swarmed him. He walked slowly, listening, no whispers, no pipes creaking, just the soft, mindless music of retail. He turned toward aisle 9 and stopped. At the far end of the aisle, a girl stood motionless. Long hair, Walmart uniform, frozen, staring at him. Emma? He ran forward, heart pounding, but when he reached her, it wasn't Emma, just a mannequin used for training. Her eyes were glass, her hands slightly too long. Her name tag said Emily. Jacob stumbled back, bile rising in his throat. Then the lights above him flickered only for a second, but he saw it again, a flicker of shadow. At the end of the aisle, hanging from the ceiling like smoke, reaching, waiting. Jacob turned and ran. That night, Jacob reviewed the Walmart security footage Brian had smuggled from a back-office computer. He wasn't supposed to have it, but Brian said he needed to see something. I watched the tapes from the night we went in, Brian had told him. You're not going to like what's missing. Jacob stared at the screen. They fast-forwarded to the time the elevator opened, when they should have walked into the secret corridor. But on the footage, they never left the elevator. They just stood. Inside, frozen, unmoving, for almost 40 minutes. Then they stepped out again, bloodied, shaking, screaming, nothing in between, no hallway, no Emma, no sublevel, like the entire memory had been scrubbed. Jacob shook his head. This can't be right. I ran it 3 times. On 3 systems, Brian whispered. Same result. It didn't record where we went. Something stopped. Jacob leaned forward. Can you slow the footage down, frame by frame? Brian hesitated, then clicked the keyboard. Frame by frame by frame. And then, just between 2 blinks, a single image appeared. A face, pressed against the inside of the elevator glass. But not theirs. It was distorted, hollow-eyed, with a mouth open far too wide. The timestamp read 3:33 a.m. Jacob whispered, "That's the moment the door opened." Brian didn't reply. The lights in the room dimmed for just a heartbeat. Jacob's laptop screen went black. Just before it did, a new file appeared on the desktop. Emma scream. Wev. Brian blinked. "Did you download anything?" Jacob shook his head slowly. "No, it just appeared." Against every instinct, he clicked it. A sound filled the room, not just a scream. It started with a heartbeat, then sobbing. Then said dozens of voices, Emma's, children's, some that sounded mechanical, layered into one unbearable crescendo. And beneath it, a voice, something deep, whispering. He looked for her. Now she looks through him. Brian unplugged the laptop. Silence. Returned, but Jacob's nose started bleeding. That night, Jacob stayed at a cheap motel. He didn't feel safe in his apartment. Something about mirrors and closed doors unsettled him now. Around 2 a.m., the motel phone rang. He picked it up, breath held. Silence, then a voice. Emma's, whispering, "You." "Brought it back with you." He sat up in bed. "Jacob," she said softly, "it's wearing you like a coat." He dropped the phone. The lights in the room went out. The closet door creaked open. Jacob grabbed the lamp and turned it toward the sound. There, inside, was his reflection. But the eyes weren't his. They were black, empty, and the mouth was smiling. Then, the figure in the mirror lifted a hand and pointed behind Jacob. He turned. Nothing. When he looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone, only his reflection now. Pale, shaking, but his. He sat on the bed, breathing fast, clutching Emma's. Tag. And then the tag burned his hand. He dropped it. It had changed. The name no longer said Emma. It said Jacob Lyons, subjectness 144. He stared and started to scream. Cliffhanger. Jacob returns to the Walmart, haunted by guilt and questions. Though the surface appears normal, he begins experiencing unexplainable events and realizes something followed him back. A presence that manipulates electronics, reflections, and possibly time. Security footage shows nothing of what they saw underground, yet eerie data appears on their devices. A new sound file and a motel mirror suggest the entity has begun attaching itself to Jacob, and he may be the next subject, just like Emma. Subject. 144. Jacob didn't sleep, not after the mirror, not after the name tag changed. By dawn, he'd scrawled the phrase Subject 144 across an entire motel notepad, again and again, as if repetition could force understanding. But it meant nothing, except one thing. They've catalogued us. That was the first thing Brian said when Jacob called. They didn't just take people, Brian muttered. They studied them, kept records. Emma wasn't just missing. Oh, she was recorded. And now you're next. Jacob sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the stained carpet. I think I've been marked. He hadn't told Brian about the other things. The shadow in his peripheral vision that blinked when he didn't. The soft static in his ears that never stopped. The whispers in vents. Find the employee files, Brian said. If she was a subject, there's a record, a pattern, maybe even a way to break it. Jacob agreed, but his voice was dull, distant, because he'd already noticed the veins in his wrist darkening. That night, Jacob returned to the store, through the front doors again, calm, like any shopper. No alarms, no suspicious glances. This time, he wore an old Walmart uniform, one of Emma's, found at the back of her closet. It smelled like lavender and rot, down aisle 9. Past the candy, past the batteries, past the flickering ceiling light that always buzzed just before things got wrong. He stopped and looked up. The tile was loose, the one they'd entered through that night. Jacob reached up and climbed silently. He was back, in the service corridor, empty, too quiet. The door at the end was unlocked. He went through and froze. The archives, Rows and rows of metal cabinets, folders stacked high, shelves labeled by date, employee number, termination status. He opened a drawer marked DF. His hands trembled. Inside, yellowing employee files, headshots, medical notes, behavior assessments, and toward the back, Emma Wallace. Her file was thick. He flipped through it. Subject number 137. Notified of anomalous empathy levels. Consistently hears low-frequency phenomena others cannot. Repeated emotional anchor readings around 3:33 a.m. Termination unsuccessful. Rematerialized after 48 days. Reclassified as uncontained. Memory suppression attempts failed. Subject reintegrated into Walmart staff. Surveillance recommended. Jacob dropped the file. His stomach turned. Emma had disappeared but came back, and they put her back on staff like nothing had happened. No one remembered because they erased it. He opened another file. And another. All the subjects had something in common. They all worked night shift. They all reported hallucinations. And they all disappeared between 3:30 and 3:34 a.m. He pulled one more file. His own. Jacob Lyons. Subject number 144. The file was already half-filled. Documents about his behavior, reactions, biological shifts since returning, electromagnetic anomalies surrounding his presence, and a final note. Anchoring successful. Host integration proceeding. Full override projected. 6 days post-contact. Jacob stared. His mind reeled. It wasn't following him. It was merging with him, becoming him, replacing him. He dropped the file, stumbled back, and a loud buzz split the silence. The lights flickered red. The intercom crackled. Unauthorized access. Subject 144. Terminate. Doors slammed shut. Jacob turned and ran. But from the far end of the hallway, shadows crawled along the walls. Not smoke. Not people. Shapes. Tall, boneless, flickering like film out of sync. Jacob ducked into a side room, a small control office, with screens, live footage, camera feeds from across the store, aisles, back rooms, break areas, and sub-levels. He clicked through, stopped at a camera marked lower ward holding, and there, in grainy black and white, he saw Emma, sitting, alive. Her head hung low, her face pale, but breathing. Jacob screamed. He slammed the keyboard. The feed glitched. The screen went dark. Words appeared. She never left. You only saw what it wanted you to see. You didn't save her. You brought it out. You are the vessel. Jacob dropped the keyboard. The lights above him went out, pitch black. A voice whispered in his left ear. Emma's barely audible. You have to burn it out. Everything it touches, everything it feeds on. Don't let it finish. He looked down. His fingertips were blackening, like ash. The thing was inside him, taking more every minute. Jacob grabbed everything he could find, a USB drive, backup keys, Emma's file, a lighter, and ran. He tore through corridors, found the back exit, pushed through, gasping for breath as the night air hit him. The shadows didn't follow, not fully, but the parking lot lights all blew out the moment he stepped into the open. The store behind him pulsed like it was alive, and in its center, a face pressed against the inside of the glass doors, Emma's mouth moving. But he couldn't hear her. Back at Brian's apartment, they watched the USB footage together. Jacob had managed to rip only a few minutes of the sub-level feed. It was enough. Dozens of people, sitting in rooms, unmoving, eyes open, pupils blown wide, attached to machines, all labeled, all numbered. They weren't dead, but they weren't alive. Their emotional states were being monitored, harvested. Each room had a speaker, and from each speaker came one constant whisper: feed the anchor, shape the host, hollow the skin. Brian threw up in the kitchen sink. Jacob sat silent, staring at his reflection in the black screen, and it blinked, but he hadn't. That night, Emma called again. No ringtone, no caller ID, just her voice in the receiver. There's only one way to stop it. You have to bring it all down. The files, the machines, the building, me. Jacob's throat tightened. No, he said. There has to be a way to... There isn't. I'm not me anymore. Not fully. I'm... The door it came through. Close it. You only get one chance. 3:33 a.m. Come alone. Licked cliffhanger. Jacob discovers the horrifying truth. The Walmart has been a covert site for emotional harvesting experiments, and Emma was a failed termination subject who was silently reinserted. Now he's been labeled subject number 144, and the entity that took Emma is using him to escape containment. With only days left before his full override, Jacob learns Emma is still alive beneath the store, part of the system. She gives him a final call with a chilling message. If he wants to stop it, he has to burn everything, including her. The anchor must burn. Jacob arrived at 3:31 a.m. He parked the car 2 blocks away and walked the rest. The air felt heavier tonight, the kind of quiet that pressed on your chest, like the world was holding its breath. Walmart's lot was empty, except for a single flickering cart return and the low, unnatural hum leaking from the building's seams. He didn't need a key this time. The front doors opened for him. The entire store was dark. No music, no overheads, just the static hush of dead electronics. He walked through the aisles like a man passing between graves. When he reached aisle 9, the lights above buzzed to life. Dim, yellow. The ceiling tile was already pushed aside. They were waiting. He climbed into the crawl space, moved through the corridor, past the archives, and toward the one door he hadn't opened before, the one labeled Emotional Anchor, Live Site. The handle was warm. He pulled it open and stepped into the heart of it. The room pulsed like a living lung, walls breathing, machinery humming with rhythm. Thick cables ran from the ceiling into the floor like veins. In the center of the chamber stood a glass cylinder, glowing blue from within, Emma floating, wires in her arms, mouth slightly open. Her eyes opened the moment Jacob entered, and she smiled, but not like Emma used to smile. This was colder, hollow, borrowed. "Jacob," she said softly, "you came." Her voice echoed from the walls, not her body. He stepped. "In forward, trembling. Are you still you?" he asked. A pause. Her mouth twitched. "No," she said, "but I remember what it meant to be me. That's all that's left. A memory floating inside this thing." Jacob looked around. The screens were lit. Each showed a face, some sleeping, some weeping, some screaming in silence, and in the upper corner of every screen, the same countdown ticked down. Zo 147. "What happens when it hits 0? Jacob whispered. Emma's voice came again. "Everything it's taken, every voice, every grief, every regret. It becomes real. It spills out. No more hosts, no more containment, just raw hunger everywhere." Jacob reached into his coat. The canister of gasoline felt impossibly light. Emma's eyes moved to it. "You know what to do." "I can't," Jacob said. "I can't lose you again." Emma's expression softened. Or something wearing her face tried to. "You already did," she whispered. "You just never let go." She closed her eyes. "And now it's using your grief to get out." The countdown dropped. 54. The walls throbbed harder. Machinery began shaking. "Now," she said. "Now, Jacob." He stepped forward, unscrewed the canister, and began pouring gasoline across the floor, across the machines, the wires, the cylinder. Emma's voice didn't change. She just kept talking. "Do you remember that Halloween? When I got lost at the orchard, you searched for 4 hours. I was scared you wouldn't come. You always came." Jacob blinked back tears. "I'll come again," he said. "Somewhere else, some life." "Do 18. He lit the match and dropped it. The explosion was immediate. Not fire, but light, a blinding flash as the gas ignited and overloaded the systems. Sparks flew, screens shattered, the glass cylinder cracked. Emma looked at him. "Last time, I remember being your sister," she whispered. "I hope that memory burns clean." And then she was gone. The chamber collapsed in on itself. Jacob turned and ran. He barely made it to the surface before the floor caved behind him. Smoke poured through the aisles, but not black smoke. It shimmered, almost white. Screams echoed. Inside it, laughs, cries, snippets of memories that weren't his. He staggered into the parking lot as the building imploded, folding in like cardboard soaked in blood. The earth beneath rumbled, and then it was silent. 2 weeks later, the news called it a freak structural failure. No one was hurt because the store was closed for renovations. No one mentioned the screams heard that night, or the charred cameras, or the black veins still receding from Jacob's wrists. Brian helped him move to a new town. No phone, no email, new name. They don't talk about Emma anymore. But sometimes when Jacob stands by windows after midnight, he hears her. Not words, just a single note, like the hum of a security scanner at checkout. And he knows the anchor is gone. But something still remembers. Final scene 1 year later. A new Walmart opens in a different state. Employees are happy. The shelves are stocked. Customers smile. But late at night, in the break room, one employee finds an envelope in her locker. No name, just a sticky note that reads, "Subject number 145. She opens it. Inside is a single Polaroid. A blurry photo of Emma, smiling behind the electronics counter, and on the back, scribbled in red ink, "Anchors regrow. Containment is temporary. You're next." She looks up, and the security mirror above the lockers ripples, just slightly, as if something inside it blinked. The end.